In a world that moves fast and demands louder, there are men who think deeper, feel more, create from the quiet places within. This is Still Waters. Conversations for and about creative and sensitive men who refuse to skim the surface. Here we dive below the noise into the currents of meaning, purpose, and authentic masculine depth. With your hosts, Bill Allen and Marcus O'Day. Still Waters. Run deeper.
You know, Bill and I have spent a lot of time talking about what it means to be a sensitive, creative man in a world that hasn't always made space for us. We've explored how sensitivity isn't weakness, it's actually a profound form of intelligence. And today we're thrilled to welcome someone who's been pioneering this conversation for decades. Dr. Judith Orloff is a psychiatrist, a best-selling author, and someone who's dedicated her career to understanding what it means to be an empath in a world that often feels overwhelming. Her latest book, The Genius of Empathy, which is a foreword by the Dalai Lama, offers something we desperately need right now: practical skills to transform empathy from something that drains us into a daily healing practice. If you've read the Empath's Survival Guide or Thriving as an Empath, you already know Dr. Orloff's work. She's been featured everywhere from The Today Show to Oprah Magazine, and she teaches currently at UCLA. But what really matters to us is that she gets it. She understands that sensitivity and empathy aren't just personality traits to manage. They're superpowers to cultivate. Dr. Orloff bridges conventional psychiatry with intuition, energy work, and spirituality in ways that actually make sense for those of us who experience the world at high volume. And she specializes in treating highly sensitive people in her private practice. So she's not just theorizing, she's in the trenches with us doing this work every single day. For those of us exploring what authentic masculinity looks like when you're wired for depth and feeling, this conversation is absolutely essential. Because empathy isn't just about being nice. It's about having the courage to stay open, to feel deeply, and to use that sensitivity as a creative and relational strength. So whether you're a highly sensitive person trying to navigate a world that feels just too loud, a creative soul looking to protect your energy while staying connected, or someone reimagining what it means to be a man who feels everything, this conversation is for you. I'm Marcus O'Day, and this is Still Waters Podcast. Let's welcome Dr. Judith Orloff. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Still Waters Podcast, working within the sensitive and creative communities to provide guidance and information to help us thrive in this world that we live in. Welcome, Dr. Orloff, and we appreciate your time here today. Do you mind if we just dive right in?
Oh, I'd love that.
Okay. Your specialty in this book is empath and empathy, which I've read probably your entire back catalog of books.
I'm a psychiatrist and I supervise psych residents at UCLA, and I have a private practice, and I'm also an empath. And so I combine the conventional medical skills and the linear thinking along with intuition and the power of the heart and energy medicine. So I combine all those elements together. And it's very natural for everyone who's listening. You can be very analytic in your head and you can be an empath too. So an empath is somebody who is able to sense things and know things about people. They have strong intuition. They care about people a lot. They have big hearts. They connect to nature. They often go in the healthcare professions. But empaths can have a hard time because they tend to absorb the negative emotions and energy of other people in the world into their own bodies, where their bodies are sponges. And so until they learn to work with that in a positive way by setting boundaries, breathing, and all kinds of techniques we can talk about, they could get very exhausted and very unhappy and exhausted because they're wanting to help everyone and taking on too much. basically. And a highly sensitive person is not so much of an emotional sponge as an empath. Empaths are a little more sensitive, and I don't mean that in a good or bad way, but they're more sensitive. And the highly sensitive person is more open to bright lights, sounds, smells, textures. There's so many things that, like, one of my empath patients said her mate just got all these typewriters. He decided he don't want to be on that computer anymore. He wants to just be on typewriters to write his stuff, but it makes horrible noises to go on the typewriter. So was talking to me about how she loves the typewriters, how to say it's not tolerable really to have that in the house of somebody who's so sound sensitive. Practical problems come up that my point is we need to talk about them. And that's what this podcast is about, which I love. And you need to talk about them in some way with friends or family and get some kind of rules going on in terms of self-care techniques with other people. Because what you don't want to do, whether you're male or female or whatever you are, you have to learn how not to take on the negative energy of others. So that's a very important skill. If you're highly sensitive, and they tend to do it less, or an empath, a full-blown empath. And so I look at it as my life's challenge to keep learning more techniques to protect my energy without shutting off all the good stuff in the world.
Doctor, thanks for that explanation, because I can't tell you how many times I've been on podcasts myself, typically with people who are not highly sensitive people. And our focus, of course, is with highly sensitive men, but it comes up invariably. What's the difference between an empath and what's the difference between a highly sensitive person? And I said, one of these days, I'm going to talk to Dr. about this and try to get an explanation and put that finer point on that. So I'm just wondering, because a lot of highly sensitive people say that they're empaths too. Is it possible to have an overlap of these two traits? And from what I understand from you, if I'm not mistaken, they are distinctively different. They're not the same, and one is not a subset of the other and that kind of thing. Would you say that certain highly sensitive people can also be empaths as well? And one final thing on that, are empaths more intuitive and have more of an ability, like you said, to sense other people and their feelings and so forth, but also to pick up things that other people are missing?
Yes, one of the great gifts of being an empath, also a lot of times a highly sensitive person, is that you're attuned to your intuition in your own body and in the world and in spaces. You could walk into a room and feel the vibes there. And so it's a gift that comes along with the sensitivities. And it could be, somebody can be both an empath and a highly sensitive person. I am. But the highly sensitive people don't have to be empath.
That's funny you say that, because that was the distinction. I would sit out on a limb there and say, I don't know this definitively, but my guess is that probably most empaths are highly sensitive, but all highly sensitive people are not empaths. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, it is. Just in terms of the internet, when I first wrote my first book on empaths, the Empath Survival Guide, I was questioning whether I should use the word empath in the title because I didn't think anybody would know what it was. And I've been writing about this for years. And my publisher, God bless them, said, please leave it. The zeitgeist is about to open up to this. And it was true. Wow, like everybody's an empath. And now, the big question is everyone, or so many people are identifying as empaths. People ask me, are they really empaths? Are there really that many empaths out there? Because there's so many people who are claiming it now, from zero to, millions and millions. So there's been a big change. And I think people like to consider themselves empath. Would hope most of them are. Maybe some of them aren't. Who knows? I don't know. I can only
I
work.
think we need more empathy nowadays, and we need more people who are empaths, because we do have a lot of turmoil and conflict and whatnot. And if there were more people absorbing that and finding ways to calm it down and help society grow in a better direction than it currently is, I think that would benefit everyone. So I'm glad for the empaths of the world. I remember when I was a younger man, I would walk into a room and immediately my mood would shift and it would be like really negative, and I'd have to step away and say, okay, does this belong to me or did I pick it up from someone in that room? And I didn't know the word empath then. I didn't have any idea about highly sensitive people. That was my training as a younger man to becoming who I am today. So I'm glad for your books because your books taught me a lot about this. So thank you for those. And thank you for all the inspiration you've given us. Do you see empaths as especially creative?
I do, because they connect to life. I just want to say I'm not saying empaths are better or worse than other people. I'm not saying that at all. Because my partner is a non-empath, and I much prefer that he's a non-empath because two of us in the same household would be too hard, with all my sensitivities going on. And he doesn't feel half of what I feel, which is great. Anyways, each empath has to decide who they live with and who they're around in terms of what kind of energy they like to be around. But I think it's a gift. And it's a creative gift. I'm in Los Angeles, and there are a lot of people I treat in my practice who are writers or directors or producers who are empaths, or art directors, costume designers. They're empaths, and they're learning how to work on a set or work with tons of people every day filming and not absorb the energy of people around you. That's the primary skill that all empaths need to learn. That you have to learn how to set boundaries so you don't absorb the energy of the people around you. It's not a good thing to do that. And empaths often feel like they can't help it. And that's not true. You can help it. You just have to decide it's a good thing to do and to be very discerning about boundaries and not taking on other people's stuff. If I go to the market and there are tons of people there, I could pick up whatever. If I was focusing on them, I could probably focus on all of them and learn something about them. But that's the thing I want to do.
Yeah.
Wilming, and it's none of my business. So I say that with gentleness to everyone out there who, is awakening as an empath, and you're discovering you can feel the pain and suffering of all the people around you. That's true, but you don't want to do it. You want to hold your energy more towards your center and build up your strength. You want to hold energy for people when they're a friend, but you don't want to do that with strangers. You just won't survive if you do that. Continue doing that.
That's great to hear about the creativity part, because we all suspect that. Most of the people that I know that are either empaths or highly sensitive have a certain degree of creativity. And of course, this is part of what our podcast is about. But we also want to talk a little bit. We definitely want to dive in about your book. So we're going to get to that in a second. But the idea is that our audience is made up of primarily of highly sensitive men. And I assume some of those men are also empaths as well. How do you find the distribution in the empath community? Is it like they are in the highly sensitive community, 50-50 men, women? There are more women that are empaths, more men, or maybe they're equal? Or has there been any kind of delineation about that as far as masculine empaths?
I just want to say I celebrate the highly sensitive man. I think you are path forgers, and you're heading on a new path that the men need to go on. This is the path that will save the world, because the way the masculine is expressed a lot of times in our world is very backward and prehistoric. It has nothing to do with our current events and what's needed in terms of the sensitivity. But I have an empath support group on Facebook. It's called Dr. Orloff's Empath Support Community, and it's mainly women. And however, sometimes the women say, where are all the men here? And then all these men start saying, I don't feel comfortable expressing myself because I was put down and called weak and a crybaby and feminine, or whatever the words that they were called. And they get scared to say anything about it. And that's pretty consistent. And then once they get all the support from the women, a few of them, again, they come out. But I think it's really hard for men having
Yes, it is.
upbringing in our Western culture to just say, I'm an empath. And it doesn't mean that you have an excess of feminine energy if you're an empath. That's what people are afraid of. Oh my God, I have feminine. It's not. It's you want to balance your masculine energy, your feminine energy into one strong, balanced person. As a woman empath, I balance my masculine energy and my feminine energy. It's not, we all have both. But you see, what people are afraid of sometimes is that it's feminine thing, and it's not at all.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because we need to, certainly thought leaders such as yourself, to be able to say that. I run a HSP men's group online, and we have the same issues you just talked about. It's very difficult. I know it was for me when I found out that I was a sensitive man or identified with that, because my whole programming, my whole life was being too sensitive was the worst thing that a man could possibly be, because like you said, it was effeminate energy and it's not good for men to be doing that kind of stuff. You're absolutely right. We totally agree with you on that. As far as we need more highly sensitive men, highly empathic men to step up, to recognize the trait, and to be able to get out in the world. And I think at the very least model what a balanced man can look like to the world. And so certainly your work and the work of Dr. Aaron and others who are championing the idea that men can also be empathic, they can also be highly sensitive and still be men and not lose that in the process. So it's just wonderful to hear that you said that, Dr. Orloff. We really appreciate those sentiments, and that's the message we're trying to get out there to men.
It's to be more of a man. When you learn to balance these things, you have more of a conscious intention in your life about what you're giving off. Most people have no idea the energy they're giving off.
Yeah.
But that sensitive men, you're more of a man. That makes, to me, in my eyes, that's who I respect. You can be a man, not be an empath, and have an open heart. And these are people I respect too. The people who are just stuck in their head, men or women, it's boring. It's tedious to focus on that. But there's so many people who just live up here. And if that works for them, that's fine. I don't want to judge anyone. But what I'm talking about is becoming more of a balanced head and heart, masculine, feminine person, and to let go of all these horrible negative messages we got as children.
Yeah. I think it allows men, getting back to the men thing again, is that it allows them to be more fully human. We have this repertoire of emotions, repertoire of feelings, repertoire of things that we can do, nurturing, intuition, things like that men are taught not to employ because it's not considered good. But as you said, it makes them a better man if they can employ all of these aspects that as human beings we naturally have. So yeah, that is really the message we're trying to push out there, to especially to men, highly sensitive men, but to all men who will listen and acknowledge that part of it.
Who are looking for that balance.
Yeah.
Because like you said, that balance is crucial. Well, when I was growing up, a big family, 14 kids, I raised my siblings, but I was always attracted to softer things, pastels, stuff like that. And so I was questioning my sexuality at that point, because that was in my developmental years. But as I matured, I started to see where those traits were important to balance out a person so that they can be open and receptive to both the female energy and the male energy without being dragged to one side or the other overly much, and to find the middle. And I think Bill said this the best. He said, that sensitive men really are here to help guide the men who have not recognized their sensitivity or their softer masculinity. And you said it yourself, Dr. Orloff, or maybe Bill did, modeling that kind of humanity, I think, is crucially important in this day and age. Absolutely.
Well, while we're talking about that, and this is, I think you've got some of this embedded in your new book, Dr. Orloff, about leadership and how empaths, highly sensitive people, can step up, and particularly as you mentioned a few minutes ago about the importance of having men come to this awareness in terms of helping steer the world in a better place. How would you describe that how that would look in our world as it is today, considering all the things that are going on in the masculine manosphere space, which is trying to take us back into another time that I think we need to get away from? How can empaths, and particularly empath men and highly sensitive men, take that leadership role? How would you see that? Would be your vision for that?
We're talking about The Genius of Empathy, which is one of my most recent books. And it's about how to apply the genius, I use that word in particular, of empathy in various situations. And one of them is in leadership. One of them is in sexuality and masculinity and femininity and what that means. And where does empathy, which is opening of the heart to other people and putting yourself in their shoes, as opposed to dividing, you're unifying with empathy. How does that come into play with leadership? Because the old model of leadership is that you have this boss, he usually tells you what to do, and you must do it his way or else you're out, you're fired. All right. And so there's one leader. Now the leadership is more in teams. And so you have in some corporations a little bit higher awareness, not in all, but in some that I've seen, a little higher awareness of empathy and how empathy is so important in a team to recognize what a teammate is doing well and what their sensitivities are and their creativity. You don't want to shut off their creativity. You want to give them opportunities to express this. And so in leadership, you can be both a very strong leader and an empathic leader. You can be both. And I look at empathy as a sign of strength, but not everybody does. I see it as when I see people being empathic, I think that person really is on a good path, because this brings up a more metaphysical point of view. But you look at, why are you here on earth? And where did you come from, where you're going, kind of thing. And maybe you're thinking about that or not. But the way I look at it is that you come here to develop your spirit and your soul. And you come here alone, you leave here alone. And in the meantime, we have this chance to develop ourselves and this precious ability to develop our empathy, to develop our hearts, to be kind to ourselves, to be kind to one another, to unify the world, to help protect the earth. All these things are an outcropping of empathy from the heart. That's what makes you want to do it. And so when you're here, if you develop that more and you're able to exude that in your life, I think you leave this place with a lot of development of the heart, and it goes with you wherever you go next. But I think that's what I look at. My job description is to, no matter what's happening on the outside or what these people are saying about empathy. I think one person said, it's the worst trait we've ever experienced in our millennium. And I'm like,
You know what's funny about that is there are a lot of religious groups that are saying that, which is surprising to me, since most religions have at least some core about caring about other people and not just yourself. And that would certainly be about empathy. So I find that really ironic that where we're hearing that same message. And this is, as Marcus was saying, is the thing the world needs more now than anything else, I think.
it's true, but in defense of these people, in order to understand where anyone is coming from, you have to see them with empathy. And that includes people you don't agree with or you think are just, that's a crazy belief. But you have to, if you want to change things, you have to understand where they're coming from. And a lot of times people from that vantage point feel that empathy doesn't have any limits or boundaries, that you just give and you give money you don't have to other people, and then you suffer and you sacrifice. And It doesn't include common sense. So they're defining empathy a little bit differently than I would. To me, empathy is a skill that you balance with common sense. You ask yourself all these questions about what makes sense in this area and how can my empathy be present with it. So you have to be practical with empathy. This isn't just impractical technique that you just go and give everything away and then suffer, or the country suffers. They're saying the country gives everything away what we don't have and then we suffer. That isn't what empathy is. That's not my definition of it. But that's why, like we started in the beginning, the definition is really important because I think people misconstrue it. I don't think they're bad people. I just think we have different definitions. And my dream is if we could have a global conversation. What is it? How can we come together with this? Let's talk about each other's point of view and then come together as opposed to polarizing.
Yeah. Now, you were mentioning something. I just want to ask this really quick because this is an important concept, especially that I'm seeing more and more discussions in and around the highly sensitive space is boundaries. You can't just have a clear, open, like you said, where you're going to absorb all this stuff. And then at some point, you have to have a certain amount of boundaries. I think that's healthy. How do empaths, in your view, deal with that setting boundaries? There's a natural drive to want to give and want to be and around people and absorb some of the energy they have just to be able to sense and feel them. But what about boundaries? How do you see empaths and highly sensitive people managing those?
In the genius of empathy, there's a big theme about empaths need to have boundaries. And there are a lot of empaths who fight this because they feel if I have a boundary, I won't be able to give and I won't be able to love fully. And they just see it differently. And my point of view is that if you're an empath and you want to have a happy, joyous, energized life, you have to have boundaries. There's no way around it. But boundaries aren't mean. They're not mean spirited. They're not going to hurt people. It's just realizing what your body needs, what energies you need to be around, what behaviors are okay with you or what not okay with you, and being able to say a positive no, to be able to say it's something like, it's not okay if you dump anger on me. And I'm not just going to sit there. I'm either you're going to leave or I'm going to leave because I do not want to be around that. But you can say it with compassion in your voice. In the Genius of Empathy, I go through the skills of empathic listening and communication. And one of which is very important. You have to get your tone down. You can't be nasty or snippy when you set a boundary, and have this underlying tone. You always can catch it, as the other person won't respond if you do have that. And to just be able to learn how to practice boundaries. I do this with my patients where I'm the one who's overstepping their boundaries or invading their boundaries. And then they practice with me how to say, I really can't listen to you at this point. I can't listen for a long time because I have another appointment over here. So I'm going to have to excuse myself. Empaths don't know how to interrupt. So they get cornered in places with the variety of people's stories, life stories, or whatever. They start up and they don't stop. And so you have to interrupt. And so you have to learn how to do it in a nice way, as opposed to, what's wrong with you? You have me cornered here. I have to get out, or to say anything like that. It's not on that level. You have to be the one. This isn't the genius of empathy. I want you to realize that you have to be the one to make the change. You can't wait for somebody else to.
Many times they don't realize they're doing it.
That's right.
And it's such a normal thing for them to just trample all over people that it becomes almost ridiculous. And I totally agree. Boundaries, learning how to set boundaries saved my life because I had no idea. And I said yes to everything and did so much that I overcommitted and would never be able to fulfill my responsibilities that I had committed to, stuff like that. I've been in therapy for 54 years and I've been very blessed. My current therapist is a highly sensitive person and an empath. And I've learned so much in her care over the last 7 years in boundary setting. And that was like the primary focus of our sessions together, because otherwise we break down. We get so inundated with other people's stuff that we just can't function. So, yeah, I'm glad you say that, because it's definitely something that we probably can all do with more of, is boundary setting.
And not feel guilty about it, because a lot of people say no. And that's just one of the phases of, there's a lot of learning as an empath. And this is one of the phases of learning, is learning to work with your guilt when you set a boundary. Because as an empath, and particularly as if you were a child and didn't know how to set boundaries, like most children don't, it can be really rough on the children. I wrote a book called The Highly Sensitive Rabbit, which is about, yeah, your adult males might want to read this. It's not just for children, but it's about Aurora, and that's my nickname, Aurora. So it's about my childhood growing up with parents who didn't understand and who called me overly sensitive. And so the heroine is the rabbit, the Aurora. And then she goes through all these experiences and learns from her animal friends how to set boundaries, how to take care of her sensitivities, how to take a breath, at least in a moment, how to ask for alone time, how to be able to say, I want to watch the moon alone, because that's what she loves to do, is watch the moon. And so as children, just as a children's book, and I went around talking to highly sensitive children and their parents. So you might enjoy it, The Highly Sensitive Rabbit, to learn how to set boundaries in a simple way. Just take a breath, take a step back. Don't say anything. Be able to put a shield up. If you want to visualize a protective bubble around you, feel free to do that. You have to give yourself permission to take care of yourself. That's part of the education of being an empath.
I think that key to being an empath is taking care of yourself. It reminds me of the airline code of the adults always put the oxygen mask over their face first before tending to the child. We have to be okay in order to help anyone. Bill, you brought up earlier that religious groups tend not to see empathy in the same way that maybe we do. And in your book, Dr. Orloff, you emphasize the difference between empathy and compassion. And I think a lot of people get confused by that. Could you describe or explain that further as to what you mean?
I'd like to edit what you just said, if I may. It's that some spiritual, it's not all spiritual. You have to really, this is like a button of mine, to not generalize with people. Yeah, it's not fair. Anyways, the difference between compassion and empathy. Empathy is the ability to feel somebody else's emotions or energy or state of joy or sadness with your heart, and you can feel what they're feeling. That's empathy. Compassion is often a little bit more distance, more discerning distance, where compassion is coming in to help somebody when they're in need. Compassion is feeling for somebody, but then taking action and going and buying them groceries, your neighbor groceries, if the neighbor needs help with that. So it's more into action. And empathy, sometimes people have a hard time with that because it brings up the whole element of the dilemma of what do you do when you absorb other people's energy. And it becomes more difficult and complex to a lot of people who don't want to do that or get into that exploration, which is fine. You can have compassion, whatever fits your heart and soul, whatever you're yearning to do is fine.
Absolutely.
Speaking of empathy, in your book, you talk about 4 different styles of empathy. Could you talk about that a minute and tell us the importance of that distinction?
I think you're referring to the cognitive empathy, the emotional empathy, the spiritual empathy, and the intuitive empathy. And the cognitive empathy is where your mind can feel empathy for somebody who's going through a hard time. And the person might say, I'm so sorry you're going through a hard time. It isn't necessarily being channeled through their heart or their body, but it's more an intellectual resonance, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Then there's emotional empathy, which comes from the heart more than the head, where you resonate with somebody's emotions if they're feeling sad, if they had a loss, When they're grieving, you feel their sadness, your empathy goes out from the heart. And the intuitive empathy, which is the ability to tune in intuitively to another person and just get a sense of where they're at, that's the ability to tune in, not just listen to what people are saying, but actually tune in and see what flashes or knowings or ahas or any kind of intuitive flashes that come through, that you're aware of that and go, oh, okay. But that brings up the element of permission. You don't want to be tuning into all these people you don't know. But sometimes, like with family members, when you just can't get, you're not communicating very well or whatever, you want to tune in your private moments to really feel where they're coming from if they're not able to articulate it, and to go deeper with them so you can respond in a better way. And then spiritual empathy, which is the ability to connect to the spirituality in another person and see and feel what's important to them, or be able to read the crown chakra up here, which is the white light and all the art, the halo, to be able to tune into the best in a person and see their connection to spirit or nature, whatever it is.
I noticed that you had a foreword with Dalai Lama, and I was going to ask you, does that sort of signify the sort of a spiritual element of this book as well as you're talking about that? I noticed you just mentioned that in one of your types of empathy. And I personally look at spirituality as, of course, different than religious endeavors per se. And I think for people such as empaths and highly sensitive people, meaning and purpose has a lot of weight with us. And I think we're naturally drawn to that kind of stuff. Are there parts of the book where you address that and talk about that as well?
Oh, yes. And just to read the foreword that Dalai Lama wrote and to see his connection with spirituality and empathy and why it's important. It's a one-page introduction, and it's just to me, it's a precious addition to this book that brings a sense of spirituality. He's one of the living spiritual leaders, so powerful on our planet today, at least for now. And so it's important to look at empathy as a gift of the heart and its use for unity. One thing he really expresses is the need for unity in our families, not to but keep fighting each other and to keep dividing. It's just not going to work unless you want the same old. It doesn't work. And so he looks at how empathy, even in the most mundane of circumstances, can bring out our hearts, and to lead a heart-centered life, an empathic life, without being foolish, without having no protection or having no boundaries. You don't want that. Usually, I can't generalize for everybody, but you don't want to have no boundaries, because then you're just going to be inundated. If you're an empath with these sensitivities, you're going to be inundated by what happens in the world and the news and if you have conflict in the world, you're going to be inundated, and you don't want to be. You want to be able to stay calm, as Dalai Lama, breathing, meditating, centering, not reacting every time your emotional buttons get pushed. You want to be careful not to get involved with substances, and because empaths sometimes go down that route,
Yes.
try and numb their sensitivities, and it's something to watch out for, as it's very common. And I treat a number of people in recovery who consider themselves recovering empaths, because before they would drink and use over all this input coming in, and now they're able to have other skills to be clean and sober and be an empath and balance themselves. So sometimes it takes going through that process, but be careful, because, and also food. Empaths may get overzealous with food and put on a lot of weight, and emotional eating is very common. And so to learn how to not absorb other people's energy and go to the refrigerator and go to your meditation instead, go for a walk, go eat something else, but have other options available other than addiction.
I was going to ask you, while you're on that track, what are one or two of your go-to soothing techniques that you use, especially when you may feel overwhelmed coming, or You just need that break. What are some of the things that you do?
Definitely alone time. Because if I can get away from other people, I have a chance of recentering myself. But if there's some kind of conflict going on and there's just too much, or I'm in an airport, which is a very difficult place for me, it's just harder. I can do it. But it's harder for me to center. But to go in my room and close the door and put my sign up, leave me alone, stay out, that helps.
Yeah.
Relate to that.
Was there anything
Also, I
that you,
went to the
oh,
ocean. I live in LA and I live close to the ocean. So walking by the ocean and looking at the moon have really been my go-tos in terms of recentering myself.
Okay.
I plan on moving up to northern Michigan and living on Lake Superior for that very reason, because drawn to the water and the moon, of course, which is directly related and whatnot. Yeah. As far as your new book, what would you like to say about it in closing? Who is it for? And why did you write this? Why did you feel it was necessary now?
I wrote the genius of empathy for you so that you could develop empathy and to realize the stumbling blocks in developing it and why you might have some resistance and how it can make your life, take your life to a whole different level of non-codependent relationships, of healthy relationships, healthy giving, how to be filled with empathy because it's so nurturing, and learn how not to take on the stress of the world or others. So I wanted to give people techniques on if you're an empath and you get caught up in getting overwhelmed, this is what you do. And just really practical tools on how to develop your empathy to better yourself, to raise your vibration, to make you feel better. It's healing. Empathy is the healing energy. And so the more you can feel for someone else, the more your own body heals. Now, as long as you have the boundaries. So how to set boundaries, how to express empathy, what's healthy empathy, what's unhealthy empathy, and how can you use it for leadership? Where is the world going with this in terms of global empathy? And what can we envision and imagine? So it goes from a lot of it's a personal practical book on how to use empathy and not get drained by it, basically.
Well, I'm finding it to be very valuable, and I'm recommending it to my groups of friends and whatnot. Yeah, it's an excellent book, and I'm learning a lot from it. So thank you for that. Bill, do you have anything you want to add?
Well, I just want to say thank you, Dr. Orloff, for coming on today. We really appreciate it. Thanks so much for the definition. I can go forward in life now and make sure I make that distinction when I'm interviewed. But more importantly, I appreciate the energy that you're bringing to this and have brought to it for many years. I've followed you for a long time and I appreciate your work. And I'm very honored to have you here. And so we can share it with our audience, and hopefully they can also learn from your books and the work that you're doing.
And hopefully this won't be the last time that we have you on the podcast, because there's always going to be a new book coming out soon. No pressure. Thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you for staying with us on Stillwater's podcast. We appreciate you, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a beautiful day.